Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.
That's right. Welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad. My name's Dave Momper. I'm your host. This is a fatherhood podcast for new dads and soon-to-be dads. I'm a new dad myself, and I'm asking every day, great dads, what does it take? What does it truly take to take on the ultimate role? All right, let's get to it. Mr. Dan Fortune, welcome to Whoa Dad, Go Dad.
Good to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, man. Really excited about learning from you, thinking what I know of you in general, and then also, frankly, for the listeners, every time I'm about to get on a call, there's a little discussion leading up to it. We just had what could have been the podcast. So I know we're in a good place together, and I'm just excited to see what unfolds. So let's give the audience a little bit of context, who you are, how we know each other. We have the good fortune of a shared friend, probably a couple, we realized, actually. Thinking of Maggie with Vita Eats, right? Like a couple different, but our friend who actually connected us, tell the world about Mr. Thaddeus.
Yeah, Thaddeus Anderson. He's awesome. He's one of my best buddies for sure. We became great friends, actually, more so when he left for New York. So, and we probably chat at least every other day. Just talk about life. So,
Yep.
Yeah.
We have a constant drip of discourse for sure. He and I feel like, I think of Thaddeus, his shtick these days too, with his content creation. I think of him as the king of play. I keep telling him that. And he's so humble. He's like, I can't be the king. I can't be self-proclaimed the king of play. But to me, Thaddeus is the king of play. So,
and that's a skill, right? To make life fun and to play. It's a skill.
It really is.
Yeah.
It really is. So tell us a little bit about, in any given day with the mind of Dan Fortune, you're thinking about, from what I know, definitely your family.
Mhm.
You adore your wife. I really admire how much you celebrate Rachel and your kids. But you're also an entrepreneur and building organizations and teams and adding value to people's lives. What's a day in the life for Mr. Dan Fortune?
Well, recently over the last year, it's been building a team with the goal of being the largest lender in Colorado. So we're well on our way to that goal. So I'm working with something called Dual, and it's real estate agents that also get licensed for lending, so they can have both skills, bring that to the table to help their clients. I'd say I'm 30% better as a real estate agent now that I understand lending. I've been licensed for about 3 years, and there's just so much to know and understand to help people. So, and then I help a lot of investors, and then I also run a coaching business called Truth and Fortune. So
Beautiful. Yeah.
that's that's the way I spend my days. So for sure, when I'm out,
you're seeing a lot of, I would imagine you're seeing a lot of the human endeavor that, people living their lives, trying to be wise with money and building wealth and creating security. And if you're doing coaching, you're helping people improve their personal realm and their professional realm. So you're seeing the human endeavor from a really interesting vantage, and you're also a dad. So are there correlations, by the way? Do you see, being a great dad and being a great business person or a great leader are they the same mindset, the same hat you're wearing, or do you shift gears somehow?
I would say I shift gears. Yeah, because my kids are young right now. So it's a lot. Like Thaddeus, we were talking about a lot of play, being a dad and that play. So like I said, having fun is a learned skill. I really do believe it is. That's not natural for me. Fun is not natural for me unless I'm snowboarding. It's not natural. I'm more work focused. And so I have to try and have fun, kind of let go and be goofy. That's just not my natural state. But it's so important, I think, with children. Somewhere along the line, I lost that ability. So I've had to go back and kind of relearn that. That's in there somewhere, but it was lost along the way. And so learning that and doing that with my kids, I think is so important to play with them, to get down on the floor, to be goofy, to make noises. Just they love it. They love it. And I see it, and it's just my brain doesn't compute but I get right in there with them because I know that's how they connect.
Yeah.
Um, so
You said you lost that along the way at some point. What explains that, or what do
I
you
think some
sense
abuse.
is
Yeah. Yeah. So I think I put up some walls to kind of protect myself when I was young. Yeah. So breaking those down is like fun. Like kids are is almost like therapy for me in a way. So I make it very clear in my coaching that coaching is about going forward toward the goals that you have and making them happen. I am not a counselor because I view counseling, which I think is a kind of a bad term because people are like, I'm not crazy. I don't need to go to a counselor. I think of it more of like a coach as well, but like helping people get things from their past resolved so then they can move forward. So I tell people, I'm not really going to help you resolve the past. I've got great people I can connect you with to do that. I'm helping you go forward, but sometimes we can't move forward until we resolve some of the stuff in the past. Um, so yeah, I've done my fair share of counseling to get that stuff out of the way.
fair? And then to lean into being silly as a dad, like what a so it's not necessarily natural for everybody, or maybe it's natural and then things can get in the way and new habits can be formed. But whether it's natural or a learned facet, there's something about being silly that
Yeah.
just is like it's inherent in these early years. It seems like I'm 4 months in, so
Yes. I mean, you're going to find your kids making noises and they're probably going to think farts are really funny. And like, and like as more of a serious kind of business guy, like that's not easy for me to like lean into. But I see how, and I've read and all this stuff, how important that play is. And so to step into that, I think that's a lot of parenting is giving of yourself into their world, like stepping into their world, not trying so hard to pull them into yours. They'll get into yours at some point. Um,
when
so
is that, by the way? It sounds like I heard this put a different, not the, maybe it's the same thing, put a different way, or it's just a tangential idea of the first X period of time is all about innocence. So innocence and play together seem coupled, but either way, at what point do they do, is reality, is it your duty to equip them for reality? Because the world is interesting, at the least, hard in some respects, violent and maddening in some respects. It's also beautiful and exciting and all. But at what point do you give them?
I'd
Uh,
say, I mean, so last night, now I'll probably get choked up here. This was a conversation with my wife because as we were talking about earlier before we started the show, dear listeners, like one of my best friends in the world and my brother-in-law, like he passed away unexpectedly on Thursday night last week. And so last night I sat down with my daughter and talked to her about him passing.
mm,
And it was like, I told my wife, I was like, man, is this the night that she starts to lose her innocence?
mm,
Uh, and is that too early? And when is the time? And how do you do it? Um, so yeah, I don't know the answer to your question. I know that you're right that life is not all rainbows and butterflies. And so how do you prepare them while also preserving this beautiful thing and letting them be in this space and evolve out of it? Um, Man, like some kids, they lose their innocence very early because of what life throws at them. Um, I don't know if there is a time that you have to plan for it. I mean, at some point, I think you want them to understand some of these things. And I think you probably, I think you and I want to tell them as hopefully well adjusted parents and individuals, as opposed to them learning it from their classmates in, kindergarten or second grade or fourth grade. At some point, they're going to learn some of this stuff. I'd prefer to share that with them or my wife or someone that my kid is close to, as opposed to someone that, they're young and they're not really passing along something that's valuable. So creating probably more confusion than anything else. So
rest in peace to your brother-in-law. And I'm gonna ask. I'm gonna
yeah.
bring him up in a moment. And I know you're okay talking about it, but it's um, I mean, it's touching, man. And I'm yeah, I'm feeling your pain. But I want to share the prompt that we kind of extracted out of you in scheduling this, and then I think there's something about what you said and my curiosity with Tony that tell me a little bit more. So I had asked you to define what it means to be a legendary father,
Mhm.
and you had written delving into who your child is and supporting them to become their best self, not for you, but for them. The joy of fatherhood comes in watching it unfold before your eyes.
Yeah.
Beautiful, man. The the realization that the joy of fatherhood comes in watching it unfold before your eyes, I'm sure that was just experiential, perhaps. Was there any wisdom that people gave you early on that said, hey, pay attention, just watch it unfold? Did you learn that yourself? Did certain people bestow that wisdom on you? And then what have you learned from Tony Becker that you feel like you'll never let go of as a
So
father?
a lot of older women bestowed that
Okay.
concept to me, like wise older women. They would say, like specifically grandmothers, I think, would say it goes so fast. And it's kind of like this cliche thing. But what what brought it home for me was when I had my son, because I looked at I remember, we had our son, and my daughter, so we brought him home. She runs up to me, she jumps in my arms, and I had been holding my son for a day and a half, right?
Yeah.
And when my daughter jumped in my arms, I could feel her legs against my thighs. So I'm holding her here, but she's long enough that her legs were kind of hitting like upper thigh. And I
Yeah.
was like, oh my gosh, my little girl is, she's tall compared to this little dude that I'm holding in one palm, basically. And the realization was, this goes in a moment. Like, it is so fast. Like, they are going to be grown. Like, you have this very short window. And that was it. Like, it was this bodily, physical experience of holding my daughter, feeling how tall she was, and like the juxtaposition, of this little dude that I just brought home. And it was just like, oh my gosh, I can't waste a moment doing this, because it's a flicker. Um,
Did that I feel like this new role I'm in as a father, it's confronting me in certain ways, in a good way, but it's confronting me. And it's like, are you using your time wisely? Because you could be spending time with Leonidas and your wife and watching the unfolding,
mhm,
or you could be, you know, of course, there's productive time that I got to be in the zone, but there's also stuff, I've been wasting my time. I've had the privilege of kind of not wasting my time, but treating it less rigorously before, say, even being in a relationship, right? So was it confronting like that? And have you changed habits and behaviors or, your methodology throughout the day as a result of this
yeah, my
revelation?
wife, I think, did a really good job of that with me. So, like, because I could work all the time. I really enjoy working. Like I said, play and fun is more difficult for me.
Mm.
Like, I wasn't a partier and stuff like that. I've had to learn how to party in my older age. Right? Like, honestly, I've had to learn how to have fun. And so, my wife was like, we have all these things, right? But like, obviously, that's not going to create the happiness long term. We talk a lot about goals and what we're going after in our life and stuff like that. And so for a year, we took off, like with our daughter at 3, at 2.5, we left the country for what was supposed to be a year. My mom-in-law unfortunately got in a really bad car accident. So we had to come back immediately about 6 months in. But like, that for me was this wonderful experiential, like, pulling away from all the things and looking at what is most important. How do I want to spend my time with my wife and my kids? And I learned that I really love some of my work. And so I took some of the stuff off and focused on other things. So that was really good. But yeah, it's like stepping back and taking a look, like, how are you spending your time? Like, are you screwing around on your phone? Which might not be bad. It might clear your mind. It might be this nice thing. But I would
True.
just say, like, designing the way that we invest our time,
Yeah.
because the hardest thing I think for us is to realize how quickly it can go. It's like, especially when we're young, like, there's no accountability for our time really.
Mhm.
Uh, and as we get older, there's just more and more things that we either need to do, want to do, or have to do. And it just gets piled on. And so then you have to start prioritizing.
Yeah,
And
true.
one of the things I talk to my clients about, like, I don't think that it's necessary. Like, for me, I prioritize my wife and my kids because I like that. But I don't know if that's what everybody is about. I mean, you look at like a Steve Jobs, and like, that's not what he was about, putting a dent in the universe with technology. And like, who am I to say that that was better or worse than a different set of priorities? But what I do think is
Sure.
really important is to figure out what ours are, because otherwise the world dictates them to us. Like, our boss might dictate our priorities to us, or a friend might dictate, or maybe a family member, a needy family member, where they dictate it to us. And then we haven't lived our life in the way that we want to looking back.
No doubt.
Right. So if you and I design this now, we say, this is really important, then we'll do it well. I mean, for me, it's ice cream Friday. Like I tell people I'm a really good part-time dad. Like for me, like in increments of about 3 hours, I will kick ass. So if you're listening to this and you're the listeners here, like, please don't misunderstand. I'm this dude that spends every second with my kids. I'm not, because I'm not good at that. At about the 3 hour mark in a day, I kind of lose my edge being a cool, fun dad. And I'm just kind of like out of it. Right. So I'm a great part-time dad. And when I'm in that window, I know I am there. I am focused. I'm doing my stuff with my kids. They are the most important. And if you're calling me or trying to get my attention, unless you're dying, bleeding, I'm like, I'm focused on dadding right now. And that's the way I know I operate really well.
Yeah. And that's part I'm reading between the lines, I believe. Tell me if I'm interpreting this right, where part of it's attributed to your commitment to your professional realm and work and and generating something notable in those productive endeavors of yours.
Yeah. Like I go to an office sometimes when my kids don't have school and stuff like that. Cause I know if I'm sitting around the house, I'll get engaged in that and I'll kind of like my day, I'll be like half dadding and half not dadding.
At the
And
same
I
time.
don't like that because it doesn't feel good to me. I don't feel like that was a great investment of my day. Like when I'm dadding, I want to be building a fort or I want to be going out and getting ice cream or running around on the golf course or something with them. Like I want to be in and focused because for me, that's where I feel like the best investment. Like when I lay down with my kids every night, what I ask them is like, what were the best parts of your day? It's very interesting to find out where they got connected, what it was, the things that stood out to them. And what I found early on is like a lot of things that I thought that I was doing that were important, they didn't even notice. Right. It was the things that were important to them. It was when they wanted to play catch. And often for me, as one of the things I wrote down is like, it's not really about our time frame. It's about their time frame because we've got, I think, step into their world. And in doing that, there's this connection that's there. So I try really hard not to be like, hey, I'm working right now. I'll come play with you in a little bit or whatever. I really try to be in their space when they want to play and they want to interact. Um, but you got to carve that out somehow, right? It doesn't just happen.
Yeah.
So
Carve it out, design it, be intentional and not just arbitrarily intentional, meaning you got to get clear on who you are, what you want, like you were saying.
yeah, yeah. It's like my daughter, she wants to sit down. She wants to do art. She wants to pull up videos on YouTube and draw pictures. Like she
Oh,
loves.
neat.
My son wants to sit on the couch and watch 1990s Power Rangers. And he'll be like, Dad, will you sit with me for a little bit? Like for him, like that is a powerful connection. Like he wants to sit
Yeah.
right next to me. He wants our bodies to be touching, for me to like rub his hair or something and be there with him. Like that, and figuring that out, like they're so different. Like one of the things, I don't want to take us for your listeners like on a tangent, but like my daughter never once like wanted to hit me or wrestle. Never. Just wasn't in like, right. So we're playing or whatever. She wasn't like super girly, but my son I mean, as soon as could walk, he would run into me. Like he has this, and this is not my nature. Like he has this very physical, like brutish nature. He wants to hit, he wants to punch, he wants to wrestle. It's like I've had to learn how to do that because it's not natural for me. Um, but again, like that's the way that he interacts. And so figuring that out is so like this is some of the beauty of dadding right here
Yeah.
is figuring out who they are and stepping into that. And like, I'm not an artist. Like I can't draw my 7-year-old daughter can draw so much better than me. I'm not a wrestler. Like, but to step into their world like that is, I mean, you could probably hear my excitement. Like it is a powerful thing. It is so powerful to step into their world and be a part of it.
Right. So I feel like the role of dad, where you're at and where I'm about to step into, is you're an investigator or um, what would you call Indiana Jones? He was like an archaeologist, I guess. He
Yeah.
was, so just
Curious.
explorers, curious,
Yes.
uncovering. You're just like,
Yeah. I think the best dad, so like Tony, like the dude was so curious about stuff and learning about things. Like nothing was stupid to him or a waste of time with his girls. Um, and like stepping into other people's world, even if you're not into it. I think that also makes you a great friend, which I think eventually being a great parent, you transition into being a great friend, I think is one of the big goals. Like the way that you talk about your dad, like I remember that being in the Jeep with Thaddeus, getting to know you a little bit, and you talking about some of this stuff, and it's like, damn, man, that, like,
Yeah, my
right?
dad's my pal for sure.
Yes, and like to love them so well as kids that then they want to be your friends, like, and that you can take off some of that mantle of having to parent. Like sometimes that still might be necessary. A kid might still want that. Like I remember a buddy of mine, he's 46. And he said, the problem with my dad is he never wants to be my dad anymore. Right.
Hmm.
Like there's something that he's still craving in that relationship. So I don't think we ever take that mantle off fully necessarily. Um, but it does transition, right? And to allow it to become a friendship to evolve into that, I think is, man, to me, that's one of the biggest goals. Like to have that type of relationship where your kids want to be with you. I mean, I don't really speak with my dad at all. And, um, you know, my mom, we speak every once in a while, but it's not a tight relationship. And like, I look at that and it breaks my heart. Cause I'm like, if my kids, you know, didn't want to have anything to do with me or they didn't feel like any connection, what a, what a sad thing.
Mm. Yeah,
So to do this well, I think is a pretty big motivator.
no doubt about it. Yeah, no doubt about it. Regardless of our experiences, can we create really positive experiences
Yeah.
for our next gen for sure. I mean, my mom and my dad are my friends, my pals, my confidants, and I'm grateful for it big time. Um, and they're still my parents. My dad's still my dad. He'll guide me, or I can lean on him in that way. But it's also just great to go into the mountains with them
Yeah.
and just get out and about, just like you and Thaddeus and I do. I do that with my dad, and I do it with my brother and my mom, and all my brother's family, his kiddos. It's kind of like it's nice to go do those things with people that are your family, but it's like friends hanging out at this point. My brother and I too. I mean, at one point I was his big brother, and I was a big brother, man. And yeah, I mean, he was my younger brother. I was the big brother, and I, we were friendly, but I picked on him quite a bit, and then we grew into more of confidants and pals than ever before in the last decade, probably.
That's cool.
Um, Tell me a little bit about Tony. What did you took away this notion of um, constantly supporting and being present with your kiddos. You see that him doing that with his daughters. What else about him? If he's a great role model, what else do you remember learning from him that you feel like that's the legacy perhaps of his that you're infusing into your style, your day to day with your kids?
Yeah. I
Does
think,
Tony live on?
yeah, fun, man. He was a fun dude. Like camping, like, picked up bow. He was always picking up kind of new ideas, like bow hunting. Um, he brought his daughters into his world and then he also would step into their world. Um, like, he is not musical at all. And yet, like his youngest daughter, she's 16 now, like really musical from a very young age. And so, like, created all sorts of opportunities for her so she can play like 12 instruments or something. Like, I mean, the girl, like, she can jam. She can jam anything that's stringed, she could play. Um, and just like reinforcing that. So I was reading through notes of his, like in helping kind of being an executive for the family and like looking through some of his notes on his computers. Cause again, he died unexpectedly. And just like seeing his notes about like, he had these notes about support. So for 2024, how to support Annette, that's my sister, his wife, like how to support her. And he had these lists of things that he was going to be supporting her in. And then he had Kylie and he had this list of all, like all these things to like support her in. And then Kira, like, and I just very specifically remember looking at the musical piece for Kira and like this is something like he doesn't know anything about, but he's like stepping into that for her, right? It's like that curiosity, that love for the thing that she is about. There's this thing that I heard a while back and they said like there's over 400 personality traits in a human. And so the idea that we're going to engineer or architect who our kid is going to be is like absurd.
Mm.
Um, we're not going to do that. But a great analogy is that we're going to shepherd for them, right? So we're not going to make them into who they're going to be. There's way too many variables. Um, the world, personality, all that stuff, but we can create an environment for them to thrive. And I really do believe that that is our call it a job. Like our role as a parent, as a dad, is to do our very best to create this environment for them to thrive. Um, for whoever they are, I think there's this person inside of them due to their genetics and all these different things. And so to help foster that to come out in its biggest form and most beautiful as opposed to trying to make them into anything. And if we do that, the world will be the best place it could be because you get the genius of who that person is. You pull that out of them and you present that to the world. And if that's happening with every human, I mean, I just don't think we can lose. So,
And you said shepherd. That's such a great
um,
visual and distinction. And I wrote down sculptor being the contrast. Like, do you want to sculpt somebody? And that still has some thoughtful notions behind it. You want to help mold them. That's I think that's a harmless, good faith intention. I want to mold my kid to be a stand-up citizen. Sure. But it has me just thinking about the actual practical nature of the role. The sentimental nature is to be a great father is all these different things, but then practically speaking, you really can't force it. You shepherd it. It's beautiful.
I think it's a great. I'll send you the clip and you can put it in the notes for the listeners because it's pretty powerful.
Wow. So you said fun. Uh, Tony exuded fun, celebrated fun, made things fun. You also mentioned how he was so attentive to others. It sounded like I was struck by this notion of he was of service to his wife, to his kids. There was a selflessness and an of service nature to his approach, to his methodology. I
I think he is the best husband that I've seen modeled. Like the way he treated I mean, I could not tell you a time. And like I lived with them multiple times in my growing up. After college, I lived with them for a year while I was at the Air Force Academy. Like I've spent, I mean, hundreds of thousands of hours with him, like hiking, climbing, whitewater kayaking. I mean, we did a lot of stuff, fun stuff, scary stuff, stupid stuff, like all of it. And I honestly could not tell you of a moment where he wasn't an awesome dude. Like I just I just can't. I mean, he just lived his life in a way that was just like it was awesome. Right? And I'm not saying that because he's passed away. I mean,
of
you know,
course,
3 weeks ago before he passed, I'd say the same thing. I'd be like, I just can't think of a time that you weren't just an awesome dude. And he had his faults. He would do things financially. He struggled to be able to do that well. That wasn't a skill set of his. Um, but like none of us are perfect. But to be awesome, like he was awesome. Like he was awesome.
so
So
sorry, bro.
thanks. Well, you know what? Like to me, I'm gonna probably post this. I took a picture of myself like as a wreck, man. Just you saw my face, it was a wreck. But like the idea and like and the reason I took it is I want my son to see that at some point. I don't I don't know how many opportunities he'll have. Like I'm not a person that cries a whole lot. I don't know how many opportunities he'll have to see that. Um, and I want him to see it because like to me, like grief is a beautiful thing. Like if Tony's passing wasn't painful, it would mean either I didn't love him well or he didn't love me well. And since both of those things are very real, like this pain's gonna suck and it's gonna suck for a long time. Um, but man, I say like bring that on. Like that's the shadow side of love is when you lose, it's gonna hurt a lot. And so yeah, bring it on.
Yeah.
He definitely loved me well. So
No, no, man.
yeah. And I mean my son won't really know him and um I want him to see some of that. So that's a cool thing. I told my sister, like when they found him, it was kind of cool. They found him with a drone. He was out hiking, doing what he loved in one of his favorite places in the world. And um, I got down there right after they had found him because I drove down once, realized like, hey, something's off here. Um, and I got down there and like the first thing I told my sister when I hugged her and saw her is like, he lives on in you and in me, right? Like there's no doubt that like the person, that's why it's so cool, such an inspiration to want to be a great person. is because who we are, like things we say, the way we influence our energy, whether that's positive or negative, like it lives on. It's one of the things I wrote down for today. Like we all have this voice in our head, and the question, like, where does that voice come from? What is that voice? Like I think a lot of people think that's who they are, but that voice says all sorts of things. You're actually the spectator, or my philosophy, that spectator of that voice, right?
Observer.
The observer. Um, but a lot of people, that voice is terrible. Like it's not a good voice. Like it's negative. It's self-deprecating. And it maybe that was a lot of times that maybe as a coach or but a lot of times it's a parent, right? And it's like, what is the voice that we want to infuse into our children? Like as we parent, specifically when they're young, that is going to be infused into them. And then that starts to dictate, influence, drive who they are going to be and what they're going to become. And so
Wow.
that voice to be this encouraging, loving, inspiring voice as they're growing, man, I think that it's a big deal. It's a big deal.
Well, that brings me back to this notion of shepherd. Like, can we shepherd? I think as a parent, I'm just throwing this out there because it's not like I have much experience yet, but I'm hoping we get to shepherd both their ability to be the observer. That's a function of the shepherding, and the sound, shepherding the sound of that voice that they formulate in their mind. And that's really interesting, so that there's a distinction for the listeners. You are not the voice in your head. You are an observer watching or listening to that voice. You can separate yourself. And there's a book, I don't know if this is where you're getting this from, or I'm sure there's multiple books, but The Untethered Soul.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So subject, object, subject, and observer. And it's like, it's really well
Oh,
articulated. And to be
yeah.
like,
Absolutely. They did the best job of explaining it so that I could understand what was
yeah,
going on for me. Right.
totally.
Yeah. Yeah.
It
Yeah.
helped me, almost, yeah, let go of the voice, and not necessarily let go of it completely, but detach from it
Mhm.
and just be the observer of it. Oh,
Yeah.
interesting.
Yeah.
Listen to that. How funny. Which is, you're also almost speaking to yourself about the voice, which then gets really interesting too. But you're going, oh, listen to that. Look at that voice talk to me about that thing in that way. Good for that voice, like, and you try to like relinquish or just neutralize your reactions to the voice and just be the observer of the moment, just passing through. So can we shepherd as adults, as humans, guiding these little creatures? Can we shepherd their ability to be a great, diligent observer and to have a voice that is empowering and loving and patient, and yeah, or at least to know when it's not, that isn't their identity, right?
That doesn't yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Doesn't have to be. Are you guiding? I'm picturing Avery is 7, so her comprehension of something like this is more available than little Remy,
Yeah.
but but
Sure.
yeah, right. Just but or is that still? Do you feel like at what point is what we're talking about available to a little one? All right, and I'm sure you're influencing their ability for this in the future, but you're doing it almost not passively, but covertly or something. You're not overtly sitting down with Avery and saying, "All right, there's an observer and a voice in your head," or are you? Maybe
Well,
you
a
are.
little bit. Yeah. So I would say in this last year, we've had some of those conversations because you start to see, and again, this goes to like what you were talking about as far as like, um, almost like their maturity, like when we were talking about, innocence, it goes like to the innocence. I don't know if there's like a day, okay, my kid turned 5.5. Now I'm having this conversation. I don't think that's the way most of this will go. I think as we are observing our kids and being in tune with them, like some of them, they're going to be old souls. They're born as old souls. If you ever heard somebody say like, they're just an old soul, right? Some of them, like, they just laugh and play. Like, I think one of my really good friends, like, he's like a golden retriever. And it's like some of his innocence has never gone away. That's partly what makes him such a fun person to be around. His name is Cody, and it's like he's just got this fun, playful nature that comes out. He's also a really great airline pilot, so he can be serious, but there's this piece of him, right, that has stayed innocent and beautiful. And so I think being in tune with that and like watching our kids, like I get the sense that my daughter is like a little bit of an old soul. So like probably about 5.5, 6, we started talking about some of these things. Like we started talking about the observe, like because she was talking about school and being frustrated and some of those things. And so we were talking about like when you're like sitting down and thinking about this stuff, like what do you hear? What do you feel? Where do you feel it in your body? And so we're having these conversations and she kind of started bringing up this voice, right? And so I was like, okay, she knows what's going on here. So then we started talking about like, well, do you think that's actually you? That voice, or could it be something different? And so we started going down. And so we touch on this every once in a while when we're chatting. Because I just think having that skill set and understanding it, man, at 8 or 10 or whatever, as opposed to me being 40 or 38, whenever I've got the concept, like that's powerful. These are tools, right?
Yeah.
Was that yes, standing on the shoulders of giants? Like I don't want her to have to learn all this stuff from scratch. Like I want to pass it along so she can already know it and then just advance from there.
She's lucky that you can transcend or transfer that information to her, let it, I don't know. Some people go through the world and the last thing they've ever thought about was that the
Yeah.
essence in that book, which is not their fault. It just is what it is.
Just they were unaware, and there's a million things that I'm completely unaware of
Fair.
walking around every day. But man, when
Same.
you get some of those type of things, it's really nice. I mean, it's a tool in the tool belt, right?
That about it.
Yeah.
You had said early on in our prep conversation earlier on that one of your duties as a dad is to model love.
Mhm.
Expand on that for me. Where are you doing that? With whom? How does it show up? What does it look like?
So I never forget the moment. So my daughter's probably, let's say, a month and a half old. I'm changing her. She's screaming, not screaming, she's crying, not uncomfortable. She's like, I don't like this, right? Um, and there's this moment in doing that that I realized my love for you is infinite. There is nothing that you could do, and I said this to her, and I say this to her almost every night. There's nothing that you could do that will ever change my love for you. It's infinite. It will always be there. And now I tell her sometimes, like, you might do things where I'm not proud of you, and you'll do some things where I'm really proud of you, but that does not in any way change my love for you. It's
Mm,
infinite. And then there was this understanding of like, I asked myself the question over like that night and over the next few days and weeks, what if I started to love my wife that way? And that
well,
was this profound, like, just right. What I realized is I had not learned to love well. And I had a long way to go. Because I had always loved my wife in this way that it was like, if you're a good wife to me, then I'm going to be the most amazing husband to you. It was almost like this agreement that I had mentally. I don't think I ever said that to her, but I know that that's the way I loved her. And then
conditional.
well, yeah, I was very conditional, right?
Yeah.
Um, and I'm just lucky that my wife has loved me very well. So I was never really pulling my love away from her. But it was like this realization that like there's nothing that Avery would do. There's nothing she could do. She could be, you know, the Hitler or the Columbine shooters or any of those things, right? And it would not change my love for her. It's
Yeah.
infinite. And then I was like, man, like, how do I love my wife that way? And then I started asking the question, how do I love like my friends that way? And then how do I treat humanity that way? And then it was like this really powerful, like changing of who I am. And I mean, I'm a long way from doing it perfectly, obviously. Please, every listener, like,
Then
very
Master
long way.
Dan Fortune here, guys.
Yeah, yeah, well, look, it's a concept, kind of like that concept of being the observer. It
Yeah.
changes your lens. Like you and I probably aren't the observer every moment of our existence. But sometimes we're able to step back into that and realize, hey, I'm getting way too deep into this conversation. My ego's getting involved. Or hey, I'm listening to that voice and I'm doubting myself or I'm fearful or I'm whatever it is, right? And then we get this perspective and we step back and we're like, okay, I'm in the seat, I'm observing. Same thing. Like every once in a while, I'm able to take this step back. And I'm like, man, am I loving my wife well right now, the way that's infinite? Or am I loving her in a way that, like, well, you didn't do exactly what I wanted you to do or whatever. Right. Um, so that like having my daughter changed me in a very profound way as far as love. And then what I've realized is like it's my duty, if you will, or opportunity or honor to love her infinitely and teach her how to do the same.
Wow.
Um,
How do you
so
teach her? What are the 4 steps?
yeah,
Are there how what does it look like?
4 billion steps. The first
Yep.
is
Close enough.
I've heard you can't expect anything of your children that you aren't yourself. And I
Mhm.
think for a lot of parents, like that's a really good place to start in all of this.
Yeah.
Um, like if we're not treating our kids with love and respect, then there's no way that they are going to treat us that way, or very unlikely. We've got to model it. And so we work really hard in our family to model that. And that was what was cool about having a second child. I think we might have been talking about this before we started with your listeners is like my daughter asked, like, does Remy love me? And I told her and he was, not even probably 6 months old. And I said, probably not yet, because he's got to learn how to love. And we get to teach him that.
Oh, wow.
And so this experience of teaching them what love looks like is a lot of what we talk about and do all the time. And I'll tell you, I'll never forget the first time we were living downtown in a high rise and we had an elevator and my daughter was walking to the elevator with my wife and my daughter turns around and she says, I love you. Like I will remember that for my whole life. Probably if I ever have a deathbed opportunity, that's probably one of the things I will hold on to.
That's gonna
Um,
be special.
yep, yep.
Yeah.
And I'll forget when my son told my daughter that he loved her. And then
Oh,
later on that night, I pulled her aside and I'm like, he's learning.
oh, whoa. Yeah.
It's cool.
I'm hearing, or I'm sensing like there's a couple steps, 2 steps maybe to teaching someone how to love. Step 1, love them infinitely. Step 2, repeat. It's
Yeah.
like, you know what I
Oh,
mean?
no, cool.
Is
I'm gonna
that
use
something?
that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. And there's an opportunity in there that I think apologize often. Um, like when we fall short, um, like at some point, our kids are going to know that we're imperfect. And maybe that's really early on, or maybe that's later. I don't know. My daughter knows for sure. Because I apologize to my wife in front of her and I apologize to her and I apologize to my son. And I do it often. Um, because I want them to know that I am imperfect. And I tell them like, I love you infinitely and sometimes I might make mistakes because I love you so much. I become fearful of something bad happening. And I might do something out of fear instead of doing out of love. And when I do that, I apologize. And I think when they start to see that and know that, then there's a real trust that gets established. Otherwise, if we pretend we're perfect and they see a mistake and they know it's a mistake, now they start to doubt us. Or if we're honest with them, now they just know that we're fallible, and I think we're more likely for them to ask. Like I've told Avery, if you think I'm doing something wrong or I'm not making the best decision, you're welcome to ask me. Now, maybe don't ask it in the moment. Like if I'm like, get out of the street, right? Just get out of the street first, and then we'll talk about whether there was really a car coming.
See.
Um, right. So let's obey. So we have this conversation. Let's obey first and then have a conversation about it. Um,
Oh, interesting.
yeah.
I like that. And you literally articulated that out. It wasn't just like in your mind an expectation, but you said, "Hey, what if we approach it this way? Listen to me, do what I tell you, but then afterwards, you have some agency and some
Mhm.
contribution in this relationship."
Yeah. Yeah.
And when you say apologize, it sounds like taking full responsibility, and it's almost like showing your kids that you're fallible, honoring that, taking responsibility. That's so much. There's so much more authenticity, richness, depth to that than this notion of perfection and
Why not?
imperfect.
So why pretend to be it?
Well
Right? I
said.
think parents pretend to be it because they're afraid of their kids seeing their fallibility for different reasons, right? One is that then their kids won't trust them or do what they say. But I think if we go through this process of like, please do what I say when I say it, because a lot of times I'm telling it for your best interest and to keep you safe. And I use like in the street, right? If I tell you get out of the street because a car is coming and a car really wasn't coming, it was something else, you know, then it's not a big deal. Right? But if you were in the street and a car was coming, they didn't see you and you got run over, that would break my heart. I
Yeah.
want you to live a long, beautiful life. And so we can talk about it later and I'll just tell you, oh, I was wrong. There wasn't a car coming. I thought there was, and there wasn't. So it's not a big deal. Let's go back and play in the street. Right. And like it's happened lots of times around like things like my wife has said that they could or couldn't do something. I didn't know it. Then my kid is, come in and I'm like, look, I told you no, you cannot have that because you like a lot of times it's around snacks and food and stuff like that, right? And then, no, you cannot have that. Get in the car. We're leaving. We get in the car. We leave. And then I'm like, it was whipped cream Wednesday. Whipped cream Wednesday. We get whipped cream, we spray it in their mouths and we spray it on their pancakes, right? So we don't tend to give them treats on whipped cream Wednesday evening because they just had a morning full of whipped cream. Well, I mean, this is the one that comes to mind. So I told my daughter, no, you cannot have that. And I kind of snapped at her. We're getting in the car. We've got to go. Get in the car. We go. And she's a little upset. And I'm like, why are you upset? She's like, well, you told me I couldn't have that, but I didn't get to have whipped cream this morning. I'm like, well, crap. I didn't know that. I wasn't patient with you. That's my bad. I apologize. Will you
Yeah.
forgive me? Right. It's like in my mind, it's those little things that start to establish this trust that you want what's best for them, but you're going to screw up sometimes.
Yeah. Well,
Right. I mean,
well
it's,
intended and
yeah,
yet
it's going to happen.
fallible.
It's
Yeah.
absolutely going to happen. But hopefully it never happens out of anything but love. Right? That's when I think the real issue would come when it's coming out of ego or something like that. Um, but if it's come, especially when it's coming out of love, you just like, for me at least, it's not hard to apologize. Like, I love you. I want what's best for you. I screwed that up. I really apologize. How do we make that right? What do I need to do? So,
Let me ask a raw question here with you hinting a little bit of abuse early on in your childhood and maybe a lack of role models to you've you've determined that modeling love is valuable because you're a wise human, but you didn't necessarily have it. So I suppose what was the learning process like? How did you come to this conclusion? Maybe it was because of the lack of it that but
what what
what
I'd
was
say
that
is,
experience?
yeah, the one thing that I would say it wasn't that my family didn't love me. That's
Okay.
tough when you're unloved. I think that's a hole that's difficult to fill. When I work with clients and stuff like that, I think it's a hole that's not impossible. Please, if you're a listener, it is certainly not impossible to fill. I think it's one of the hardest things to fill. I did not deal with a lack of love. I think love was done wrong,
See.
right? So like the abuse and stuff like that, it was just they lacked skills. Like they didn't have the skills to do it right. Financial frustrations, emotional frustrations, act out physically, but it wasn't that I didn't feel that I was loved.
See.
Yeah.
So I'd asked you a little bit about uh, fatherhood and almost the weight of fatherhood. When did it strike you as like the magnitude of it? And you said even before you
Mhm.
were a father, when you first got a dog years before, and there was this interesting observation you had in that moment that then led you to be a great dad down the road, kind of being a steward of our own energy and our own vibes. And I just think that's so wise of you. Will you describe a little bit for those
Sure.
listening, kind of that
Yeah.
journey
So, yeah.
there?
So my wife and I are like, I won't go into our personality profiles and all that, but like you could put on one hand the number of times we've argued. It's just our personality is not such that we do that. Um, and we've been given lots of skills and training and counseling and all that stuff. To the listeners, like counseling for a marriage, I think is one of the best things. We go at least twice a year and it's become fun because we're building the flywheel is going, we're enjoying when we go, we're getting new skills. It's not because life is falling apart.
Well,
Um, but one of the times I've never raised my voice at my wife. She's raised her voice once at me. And it was around this. We bought a dog and I didn't want to get a dog. She wanted to get a dog. And like most things in our life, she ends up being right. And I don't say that to be self deprecating. She is very in tune. She's very intuitive. And so we ended up getting a dog and it was miserable. This dog was like a terrible thought. We put it through training and all that stuff. And it just, like they said, it had anxiety, separation anxiety. Anyway, without getting off track, very early into having that dog, it would go to the bathroom all the time in its kennel on itself, all over the house. And one day I came home and I was just over it. And the dog was in the hallway and I screamed at the dog. And it was like almost like that observer that we were talking about earlier. I saw this person inside of me and I never hit the dog, but I saw the propensity to do it. And it scared the shit out of me. And I told my wife, until I can get this figured out, I shouldn't have kids because I just didn't want to go down that path with my children. And it really and it allowed me. And I think, I mean, we struggled to have kids. We actually, for our daughter, we had to get help having her. And so it allowed us a lot of time. There was probably 4.5, 4 years in between there, you know, where we weren't able to have kids, that I was able to make sure that I got all that stuff out of me.
Mm.
Went talked to good friends, talked to good counselors. Like, how do I make sure that this isn't something that flows out of? And there have been times, tired, exhausted, frustrated, that I could feel that starting to bubble up in me. Not really with my son. So, well, that's not true. With my daughter, I remember being at the mall one time and I was exhausted, and carrying her. My wife had to get something. Um, and I remember she was screaming and I so badly just wanted to like squeeze her. Um, so that was one time. And with my son would hit my daughter, and like I've raised my voice a few times at him. And that's when I felt that. And so I actually started a parenting group because I said, I don't know how to um, deal with getting my son to stop hitting my daughter. Like, we've never hit him. We don't hit them, but you and I talked about, my son has this nature, very physical nature. Um, and I was like, I so badly want to like pick him up and throw him across the room when he does this. And I certainly will never do that. So how do I navigate this? Um, and so these are things, and for your listeners, like, you might have these ugly things inside of you, but it doesn't mean that you have to act out on them. I think it's this awareness that we have it, because all of us have things that in our nature from growing up or whatever, this or that. Again, that voice, you might have some of that negative energy, those negative voices. There's some part of us that's not perfect all the time. And to learn how to deal with that in a way that it doesn't overflow into our child's lives, I think is super valuable.
What did the group either reveal to you, or what conclusions did the
Oh,
group come to about?
I'll give you 2. So we've read 3 books, and we started a new book, this Saturday. So it's just a bunch of group of friends. We all have kids around the same age. And it's like, this parenting thing can be so hard. It's really nice, like, to be around other people. Like, one of them has a daughter that has sensory issues. And like, he's like, man, it is so hard for me to even want to be home sometimes. And now she started to grow out a lot of that. But like, when your kid is young, it feels like this is going to be forever. And so one of the buddies in the group, he has a 26, 27-year-old daughter. He had her at 19. And he also has adopted 2 kids. The youngest is 4. So he has this spectrum, of being a dad. He's an awesome dude. We will definitely get him on your show. Like,
Mm.
this man is a wise, beautiful human. And he said something in the group. He said, like, reading these books are good, but like, I didn't have this, right? I didn't have this all accessible. There weren't podcasts and all these books and stuff when I was 20 years old trying to raise. He said, one of the things to know is like, some of this is just a stage and you just have to wait it out. And that was really valuable, because in the moment, it feels like my kid is going to be like a terrible human because they do this.
Mm.
And the reality is, my son grew out of it in about 6 months. So I just had to be close, and my wife close and present, and make sure he didn't poke my daughter's eye out. But like, he hasn't hit, since he was probably, I don't know, 2.5 or something. Like, it didn't happen anymore.
Mm.
So he grew out of it. And we told him, we parented him through it, but like, I think some of it just aged out. And the other thing, again, it's funny that the 2 biggest things weren't from the books. They were just from the conversations around it. Is one of my buddy's wife said she was hit by her brother, and her mom told her, and this is what I told my daughter as well: hit your brother back. Like a bully, you punch him in the mouth one good time and they're probably going to leave you alone. So I'd been telling my daughter, like, just hit him back really hard. You have full authority to hit him back. He's hit you first. And she said, my mom told me that I had to hit my brother. And she's like, I hit him and I've regretted it for the rest of my life.
Mm.
And like, her personality, she took this on, and this guilt, and like, she still has it as a 40-year-old woman. Right. And so like, I took that as like, for one kid, you might tell them that they could do it and it would give them agency and they would feel empowered, but that's not everyone. And that's part of the point of this. I think the big takeaway from this for your listeners from our conversation is, every kid is so different, and it's about figuring out who they are and bringing the best out of them. Because there's no one size fits all in this, man. There's just not, which is really cool and a little bit scary at the same time.
Yeah. No big deal. Don't worry about it.
Yeah. So get some tools in your tool belt, love the hell out of them. And I think in the long run, like, we're resilient. It's like, even if you mess up, like, we're resilient. I mean, I'm proof of that. So
When you're saying that you sense this, this fire in you with the dog, or anytime with your son, just you notice it, but then you channel your energy, or you become a steward of your energy and redirect it. But um, what's your sense of the way, like, raising, say, a strong boy these days, and then into a man who, of course, is respectful and loving to women, and you know, but there's this whisper out there, if not in our face, where like they're being masculine and powerful and dangerous is bad, and yet would you rather be a warrior in a garden or a gardener in a war? That kind of notion, if you've heard that, it's like,
Yeah.
how are you thinking through that? And you're, I know we're virtual two-dimensional creatures right now, but you're a capable dude physically. And I'm sure my sense of you're industrious, resourceful, and you can kick some ass. So I know you've got that in you, but it's not it's not wielded um, in d- a dis in a destructful way.
Yeah. I don't have all this figured out for sure. I think so. The lesson I learned from a buddy of mine, he's older, so I really like to talk to folks that have walked the path, right, and have done it successfully. So he's probably in his early 60s. He's a retired firefighter, and his son is like tiny, tiny, tiny. So he's like a big, like masculine firefighter, right? Jumps into fires, does all that stuff, fire chief. And his son is like a tiny dude. He's an artist. I mean, I wouldn't use the word feminine, but he's not what you think of as this big masculine dude.
Okay.
Um, and he said that he looked at his son as kind of like what we started talking about, is about bringing out the best traits of his son. Um, and so I think we can fall into this idea that a man has to be this thing. Um, and like, I want my daughter to be strong, right? Like when someone wants to if someone ever wanted to take advantage of her, like, I don't want this dainty, soft, beautiful. I want her to be able to stand up. Like we have this conversation often. It is your body. Or like, if you don't want someone touching it, like even if we're playing and I'm tickling you or throwing you around, the moment you say stop, I stop. And everybody is expected to respect your body that way. And if they don't, you or I will do something about that. Right. And I was like, I might not always be there. So let's talk about what you're going to do if somebody is treating your body in a way you don't want them to. Like, I want that strength. Like, to me, that's a masculine strength. If we were going to go in the classical terms, like,
Sure.
you respect me, you respect my body. Like, here's the boundary here. Right. Um, and if you don't, I'm gonna kick your ass, or I'm gonna find someone to kick your ass. Right. Because that boy might not have the ability, like this firefighter, his son, I mean, he's not much bigger than most girls, right? So he's going to have to find a different way to put up those boundaries and protect himself. It's not going to be him kicking somebody's ass,
Sure.
right? And so, like, I think it's about figuring out what those represent and these individuals on how to pull out those parts of them. Because my son, I mean, I think he's a pretty average size, a little bit chunky. We were talking about their skin and their rolls of fat and like biting them or squeezing them or whatever, right? He had quite a bit of that when he was born. So I loved it. But I don't know how he'll end up. Right.
Sure.
But I want him to have both the grace and the peace and the comforting abilities that we would say are classically feminine. And I also want him to be able to say no to someone to hopefully protect the people he loves. Um, and those type of things. And if he's a tiny dude, maybe the way he protects the ones he loves is he's really funny or he's really outgoing and he has this community of people, right?
Yeah.
That are the protectors because he might not be the physical protector.
Sure.
There's a huge value in that, in being able to create this community that keeps you safe. And then being smart and not walking down the street with you and your kid by yourself in places that are dangerous. So
Yeah.
if you do, grab a big buddy like you and Thaddeus. So
Tell me, I want to riddle on some practical things as a dad, because a lot of this is really valuable sentimentally and philosophically, and been some really good nuggets in there. But I was on a plane just yesterday traveling, and I was on business trip, so it was not with my family. I just realized, like, as a dad, and I'm sure you and Rachel collaborated on this a bit together as well. But how do you design a new world where you've got these massively new factors, a kid, a living human being that you have to take care of. What kind of things did you adjust? Or let me think about this. What kind of things did you expect to need to plan around that then you realized I should have just let the moment show up to maybe dictate what kind of tool we buy or the setup we create in the house. Like, and I'll give you an example on my end. We thought, based on our living arrangement, we're like, well, let's get a couple a couple different bassinets and or there's like, you almost it's impossible to plan for the reality. And some people can over plan. And we found it really useful to just let kind of the need,
Mhm.
necessity dictate how where we store diapers even. Like we have a room with a changing table in it, and we've never used the changing table because we ended up finding a lot more flexibility in using kind of these little potty pads that like little puppy pads you can think of
Mhm.
sometimes around
Put
the
'em in
house
different
for
places.
small. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
like we just carry those everywhere we go. And they're downstairs, they're upstairs, they're everywhere. So like the adjustments we actually made or the approach we actually took was way different than if we would have planned 6 months out.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's like, what kind of stuff did you do to set up your new realm to be baby favorable? And then even thoughts on how you travel with kids. Like how do I mean, you were around the world with kids too.
Yeah.
So like what kind of practical stuff that did you find really useful um, eventually once you were truly in the role and in the moment with your kids?
So my wife gets the credit for like 99% of it for
Yeah.
sure. Because she performed most of that role. One thing she did that I think was really wise was she talked to a few of our friends that had kids that were just a little. So when we got pregnant, like she asked a few of her friends that had kids that were like 1 or 2, like, what were the things that you couldn't live without? What were the things that you kinda and so she got this list, and then we went through that list together. What in here seems like we really need like a stroller? It was like, "We gotta have a stroller." Like, now which one? I don't know. There's like 1,000 of them, and you could pay 15 grand for it, or you could, you know, pay $75 for it. And it was like, well, how do you know what to get? So those are just conversations around budget and what makes sense and stuff like that, right? She had this list. It was cool because then we built on that list and then we gave it to the next families that needed a kid. And that list is kind of like floated around. I'm sure we can find it somewhere now. Right. And it was like, it was kind of the best of breed. And as new products come out and stuff like that, I think it's important to understand. Well, one, I'll start with this for any dad listeners out there. I think it's very important. I tell this to every expectant dad. You need to give your partner at least 9 months, 9, 10 months between getting pregnant and having the baby. And then most people forget this from the time they have the baby to about another 10 months. There are so many physical, mental, emotional changes going on there that, like, the way I look at it is they get a free pass. If they do crazy things, like that's not really who it's like someone in the middle of grief, right? Or someone in the middle of fear. Like they're going to react in a way that's not necessarily really them. There's all these things happening. So to give them this free pass is really helpful. And just to know going in, because we owe our partner everything. They brought a life into the world and they sacrifice their body, their mental well being, their physical. And some people never get all of it back, right? So like, I think we discount the magnitude of what that thing is. Like, it's majestic, it's magic, and for those of us that are males, we can't do it. So, like, we are 100% dependent on them to do that well. So, that's where I'll start. Then I will say, like, marketing wants to try and sell us everything as parents. Like, you need this in order to be good at this. And to your point, a lot of this crap we don't need. It's just being marketed to us. So to take a good look at it, like what are the things we know we absolutely can't go without? And then we have this list of things that, to your point, as we get into this, like one of us will go to the store and get it because we realize we need it. Like almost zero is it like time critical. You have to have it that moment. It's
Mhm.
more of like it makes life easier. Right. Um, and so
I was just, the amount of stuff, as you just said, is crazy. The amount of things you can buy, and we could probably invent a product or take an existing product that's out there already and make it, you know, polish it or whatever you'd say, like just
yeah,
make refine it a little bit and
little
market it
spin
out there
on it.
because people are hungry for creating the perfect realm and environment and having the arsenal of everything. It's like this is a little this is my best example. Like, socks for babies don't make sense to me. Put they're gonna kick them off of it, and then putting them on, you
So
know, it's like, and they're kicking while you're trying to put them on. Then they'll kick them off, and then it's like they're these tiny little things. So then you do wash them, and I've just seen. I'm like, why is there only one of these socks? He's like, I don't know. I don't even use those socks. Mac would say. Well, we found instead of socks, it's just either like a onesie with booties on it, or just these little booties that are kind of like slipper
moccasins.
snow boot, Velcro snow booty things.
Yeah.
And it's like, if you actually need to cover his feet, make it easy on yourself.
Oh, and they Velcro on and they stay on. They can't
Yeah, exactly.
made it.
So just little adjustments like that that I wondered if you'd notice the same thing, being a really, you're practical, you're spending your time wisely, you're a business mindset. So you're like, what's wasteful, what's efficient and value add?
Yeah.
And I'm just surprised about how much maybe noise is the right word, or superfluous stuff that we're led to believe we need to do or that we need to have, when if you let life show up, I mean, you do need a car seat before you have a kid in the car. Like that kind of, there's some things like that. But the rest of it, even how much clothes, and maybe this is sometimes more on moms. I'm in the midst of, talking with Mac about the amount of clothes and the diapers, and it's like I'm a sounding board, if not solving the issue.
Mm.
And we overthought it a little bit. And I think there's, life is going to be pretty straightforward with you. It'll be clear what you actually need if you just let certain aspects of it show up.
Well, yeah, I agree. But baby clothes with buttons to me is like stupidest
Well
thing.
said. What
Like
are people thinking?
I have no like I just like, so like, why am I
Every
doing
time?
yelling and like
No,
spaghetti's boiling and like what am I doing here? Why am I trying to button this? Or you just like
exactly.
whoop, done. Yeah. You're just
Exactly.
like all those little things that make it so much easier. Yeah.
Yeah. Baby clothes with buttons, socks. What else is there? What else is there? All right. So thinking a little bit about how we wrap this up. I'm thinking about the Tony factor, and we're dedicating this episode to your man there. I mean,
Thank you. Yeah.
this is is almost, it's a beautiful time to have this fall, that, and you, I think we scheduled this like 30 days ago, right? So coincidentally, I'm grateful that you were willing to share on that raw level.
Yeah.
And I'm thinking this question I'm about to pose to you. I'm wondering how he would have answered it, knowing a little bit
Better.
about.
I don't know, but
Bear with me, bear with me. I want you to think about, you're probably still alive at this point, but your kiddos are in their 60s. They're sitting around with some of their best friends, their family, and they're waxing philosophically about dad. What three things is Dan Fortune known for as a father when his kids are in their 60s and they're reminiscing about you?
3 is hard. Like, I know, like, the thing that I want them to say is, like, I don't think it would have been possible for him to have loved me better. Um, so what 3 things? Um, I really do want to be a fun dad. That's something that I work on, because it's not natural, which probably in the end will work out, right? Because I tend to, if I focus on something, so I read about stuff. I've got a buddy that he's got to be like, he does magic tricks and stuff with his kid. Like he does these things. Like he is just his
Making
name is
us look
Frank.
bad. Holy smokes.
Oh yeah, yeah, yeah. And I laugh with him about it all the time. Like, dude, but I could either, I could be pissed off that he's just way better at this than me, or I could just ask him how to be better. So I just ask him how to, like, what are you doing? Because he just is so good at it, right? Like he's a guy that he's just fun to be around. Like he's a guy that you just want to drink beer with him. Like he tells good stories. He's a fun guy to be around. Um, and so yeah, like I ask him, like, what are you doing? Because he's got 2 girls and like he just has these fun, cool ideas. So I really would like, I think my dad, I don't think there's any way my dad could have loved me better. My dad was somebody fun to be around. And I think something along the lines of like, he was someone that I could trust and wanted to go to, um, I think would be a cool thing. Cause that's not something I had. But I found other men and women in my life that provided that to me. And I think it's a valuable thing to feel like you kind of talked about that about your dad, like someone like, not that your dad or these people have all the answers, but like, I trust you, like to go to you. And like, if I don't have the answers, for me to be able to tell my kid, like, I don't know the answer to that. Let's figure it out. To have that trust there where it's like, if I'm on the ropes or even I'm not on the ropes, I'm just curious that they would come, if they're just curious to come to me. Um, I play that role with a lot of like people that I coach. And I think it'd be fun to be in that role with my kids where they would just want to ask me questions and see what my opinion was, bounce it off. I think it'd be badass.
I think the odds of your kids saying dad loved us unconditionally or loves us, he's so fun to be around and that he had our back at all times.
Yeah.
We could go to him for anything. Like odds are high, my friend.
Thanks.
Odds
Well,
are high.
thanks. I mean, clearly with what you're doing and digging in, man, I don't know if there's a smarter thing that you could do as a new dad. I interviewed 3 dads that had girls before we had ours. Like I went out to California to meet with one of them. Because I knew their daughters as grown women. And I'm like, these are dialed women.
Mm.
What did your dad do? And they shared with me about their dad. And then I went and met with those men.
Wow.
You're doing something very similar. I think even on a larger scale, that's like, it's badass.
Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Mr. Dan Fortune, thank you for your time. Thanks for pouring your heart out. I feel you. I respect you, man. And I'm sending just love and love and empathy to your sister and her daughters. And I'm thinking
Yeah.
about you, buddy.
Thank you so much. It's a cool opportunity. To your listeners, what a cool experience. I'll be tuning in to your other episodes as well. It's just a cool opportunity to learn and take in some good energy for sure.
Absolutely. All right. We'll
Thanks.
see you next time, buddy.
Hi,
Appreciate
brother. Thank you so much.
There you have it. That's been another episode of Whoa Dad, Go Dad. If you like what you're hearing, hit the like button, subscribe to the podcast so you get the future ones, and please spread the word and post this episode to your social networks. That's powerful. Perhaps the best thing you can do is share this directly with a new dad or a soon-to-be dad that you know personally. Let them know you're rooting them on. And indeed, drop a comment and be really a part of this dialogue on fatherhood with me. Let me know in the comments a question you want me to ask other dads, or just some feedback. How does this sound to you? What's helpful? What stands out about these conversations? I would appreciate that intel as I grow Whoa Dad, Go Dad. I've got many more episodes to come, and I'm so glad you're here. Looking forward to catching you on the next one.
Whoa, Dad, here we go now. Oh yeah, the ultimate roll now. Oh yeah, here we go now. Whoa, Dad, go, Dad.